That night, I watched my wife slip into my son's room again, barefoot, silent, like a shadow that knew exactly when I was too tired to notice. I thought she was checking on him. I was wrong. What I saw on that hidden camera destroyed everything I believed about love, family, and faith. My name is Mark Reynolds, and what I'm about to tell you isn't a ghost story. It's a story about the evil that hides behind gentle smiles and the revenge that came in the quietest form, peace. If you're watching this video right now, hit like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you are listening from. I want to know how far this story travels and how it makes you feel. Because sometimes the only way to survive a nightmare is to tell it out loud. The first time I saw my wife slip into my son's room, it was 11:47 p.m. I remember that number because it branded itself into my mind like a scar. The hallway was dark, the kind of dark that hums, and the light from Caleb's room spilled through the crack in the door, thin, trembling, guilty. I should have gone in right then, but I didn't. That night, I told myself it was just her being a caring stepmom. I couldn't have been more wrong. My name's Mark Reynolds. I'm 52, a long-haul truck driver who's spent more nights staring at highway lights than the ceiling of his own home. For years, it was just me and my boy, Caleb. After his mom, Anna, passed from breast cancer, I swore I'd raise him right. And I did my best, though. Sometimes my best meant being hundreds of miles away, hauling freight across the plains while he slept alone in Wichita. 3 years ago, when I met Vanessa, I thought God had finally sent us peace. She was calm, polite, and talked about family the way church folks talk about salvation. She worked part-time at a nearby chapel, helped organize Sunday dinners, and everyone called her a blessing. And maybe at first she was. She made the house smell like cinnamon again. She laughed easily. She prayed over our meals. She told me she loved Caleb as her own. For a man who's spent half his life behind a wheel, that kind of warmth feels like redemption. So I married her. I believed her. And I went back to the road thinking home was finally worthy. 3 weeks away this time. Texas to Nebraska and back. Endless asphalt and cheap coffee. When I pulled into our driveway that Friday evening, the ski was pink over the wheat fields. I expected Caleb to run out like he always did, barefoot, yelling dead, but he didn't. The porch light was off. Only the dog barked. I knocked on the door, half laughing and half exhausted. Vanessa opened it with that careful smile of hers. Her hair was tied back, her apron dusted with flour. "You're home early," she said softly, kissing my cheek. Inside, everything looked perfect, too perfect. Dinner on the table, candles, a pie cooling by the window, and Caleb sitting at the end of the table, quiet, pale, staring down at his plate. "Hey, buddy," I said, walking over to ruffle his hair. He flinched. Just a little, but enough. I froze. "Hey, it's me, you okay?" He nodded, eyes never leaving the mashed potatoes. Vanessa laughed lightly. "He's just tired. He's been helping me with chores all week." Her tone was bright, practiced. Something about it made my stomach twist. I tried again during dinner. "How's school, kiddo?" "Fine," he said. "You still drawing those superheroes?" A shrug. Vanessa placed a hand on his shoulder, gentle, but he tensed up as if it burned. "Caleb's going through a quiet phase," she said. "Boys change." After dinner, I went to unpack. Our bedroom looked untouched, everything in its place. Vanessa came in, sat on the bed, and said she was glad I was home. She talked about church, about the women's prayer group, about how she'd been teaching Caleb discipline. Structure, she called it. "He needs it, Mark. You know how boys get without a strong hand." I wanted to believe her. She sounded so certain, so righteous. I told her I trusted her. Because I did. And maybe because I didn't want to feel like I'd failed as a father again. That night, I lay awake listening to the house breathe, the hum of the fridge, the old pipes sighing. Vanessa's breathing beside me was steady, peaceful. Mine wasn't. Around midnight, something woke me. A creak, a soft click. The sound of a door opening down the hall. I sat up listening. Barefoot, I walked out of the room. The hallway stretched ahead dim, except for a sliver of light spilling from under Caleb's door. I took a step closer. The floorboards groaned. Through the narrow gap, I saw movement. Vanessa's shadow crossing the light. Her voice came low and calm like she was praying. Then a whisper, Caleb's shaky pleading. I couldn't make out the words. Every instinct screamed to barge in. But my mind argued back. She's comforting him. He's having nightmares. Don't make it weird. I stood there, frozen hand on the doorknob, my heart hammering. Then the light went out. Footsteps approached from the inside. I darted back to our room, slipped under the covers pretending to sleep. A few seconds later, Vanessa eased the door open and crept back into bed. Her skin was cool, her breath slow. I watched the red digits of the clock blink 11:47 p.m. That image, her moving through the dark, silent, as smoke stuck in my head. The next morning, I asked Caleb about his sleep. He looked at his cereal, shrugged. Fine. Vanessa smiled. He's just shy around you after you've been gone so long. She kissed the top of his head. He didn't react. Didn't even blink. At lunch, I noticed faint purple marks around his wrist, half hidden under the sleeve of his t-shirt. What happened there, sport? He pulled his arm back quickly. Fell. From the porch. Vanessa cut in smoothly. He's clumsy just like his dad. She laughed. I didn't. That afternoon I went to the garage pretending to fix the truck, but really, I was trying to calm the knot in my chest. There's a kind of silence fathers learn to recognize, the silence of fear. I'd heard it in soldiers once years ago, and now I was hearing it in my son. That night, I decided I wouldn't sleep, just to see. I kept the bedside lamp off, eyes open to the dark. At 11:30, Vanessa turned. I'm going to check on Caleb, she whispered. Why? He's fine, I murmured. He's been restless lately. I watched her leave, the faint glow from the hallway, tracing her silhouette. I waited. 1 minute. 2. 5. Then a soft sound again, the murmur of words, rhythmical, almost like a prayer. Only this time there was another sound under it. A choked sob. My throat went dry. I started to rise, then stopped. If I confronted her without proof, she'd twist it, make me doubt myself. I'd seen her do it before with neighbors, friends, turning any accusation into pity for herself. So I waited. At 12:02 she came back to bed. No smell of perfume, only faint antiseptic and candle wax. She lay down and whispered, He's finally asleep. Then she kissed my cheek and turned away. I stared at the ceiling until dawn. When sunlight broke through the blinds, I knew one thing for certain. Something was wrong inside that house, and I was done pretending not to see it. That day I told myself I'd watch, listen, and find out what was happening while I was gone on the road. I had no idea that decision would lead me to install a hidden camera in my own son's bedroom, and that it would show me things I'll never unsee. The first thing I noticed was the drawings. They weren't the colorful sketches Caleb used to make superheroes' trucks or dogs with oversized heads. Now his papers were filled with dark scribbles, heavy lines pressed so hard the pencil almost tore the page. And always the same image, a small boy lying in bed and a woman standing over him. Sometimes the woman's face was blank. Sometimes it looked eerily like Vanessa's. I found one of those drawings tucked between his math homework. He must have hidden it there by mistake. When I asked about it, he froze. His small fingers tightened around the paper until it crumpled. It's nothing, Dad, he whispered. Then why are you shaking? He looked at the floor. Please don't tell Mom I said anything. His voice cracked on the word Mom, like it hurt him to say it. Something in me shifted that moment, a quiet, heavy dread I couldn't shake off. I'd seen fear before on the road in the eyes of men, after wrecks or strangers who'd lost everything in a storm, but never in my own son's eyes. Vanessa, of course, had an explanation for everything. "He's been praying at night with me," she said one morning, pouring coffee like it was communion. "I'm teaching him obedience. Faith brings discipline, Mark. He needs that." I tried to keep my tone calm. "At midnight?" She smiled. "The soul listens better in silence." She said it so gently I almost felt guilty for doubting her. Almost. The house had started to feel off. Too quiet. When I left for deliveries around town, Caleb stayed in his room with the door shut. When I came home, Vanessa had already tucked him into bed. And every time I looked at him, I saw more shadows under his eyes. A week later, I got a call from his teacher, Mrs. Parker. She'd taught Caleb since first grade, a kind woman, the sort who keeps stickers in her desk for when kids do something right. "Mr. Turner," she began softly, "I don't want to alarm you, but I've noticed Caleb seems anxious lately." "Anxious?" I repeated, gripping the phone tighter. "Yes. He flinches when someone raises their voice. And he's been drawing disturbing images. When I asked him about them, he said they were part of his dreams." "What kind of dreams?" There was a pause. He said, "The woman comes at night." Then he started crying. My stomach turned. I thanked her, hung up, and just sat there for a long time, staring at the muted TV. The sound of the clock ticking felt like hammer blows. That night, I didn't mention the call. I just watched. Dinner was quiet. Too quiet. Vanessa set the table with that same perfection, folded napkins, her favorite candle burning lavender, but the air felt heavy, like no one dared breathe too loudly. Caleb ate slowly, head down. I tried to make conversation. "How was school, buddy?" he mumbled. "Okay." Vanessa smiled without looking up. "He had a good day, didn't you, sweetheart?" Caleb nodded quickly, eyes darting toward her. That's when I saw it, his shoulders tensing every time she spoke. "You still drawing?" I asked. His fork clinked against the plate. "Not much." "Why not?" He hesitated, then said softly, "Mom says some drawings make God sad." The way Vanessa looked up from her plate, slow, deliberate, her eyes bright but cold, made my skin crawl. "I told him to focus on uplifting things," she said smoothly. "Not darkness." "Darkness?" I asked. "He's 8. She shrugged, smiling faintly. "Evil starts early if we don't guide it." The rest of the meal passed in silence. When Caleb excused himself to go to bed, I caught the faintest tremor in his voice. He always used to hug me goodnight. That night he didn't. Later, when Vanessa went to shower, I stepped into Caleb's room. He was awake, curled under the covers, staring at the ceiling. I sat on the edge of his bed. "You can talk to me, son. About anything." He turned his face toward me, eyes wet. "I'm fine," he said, then quickly added, "Mom says I should be." "What does that mean?" He swallowed. "She says bad boys make trouble for good fathers." I froze. "Did she say that?" He nodded, clutching his blanket tighter. "She says you work hard because I'm not grateful enough. But I'm trying, Dad. I'm really trying." His words came out like a confession, shaky and small. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to tell him none of that was true, but something deep inside me whispered that if I pushed too hard, he'd retreat further. So I just said, "You don't have to try, Caleb. You just have to be you." He nodded, but I could see he didn't believe me. The next morning, Vanessa was humming in the kitchen, flipping pancakes. "You were up late again," she said without turning around. "I was thinking," I replied. "About what, Caleb?" Her humming stopped. "What about him? He's quiet lately. Withdrawn. Maybe he needs to talk to someone." She turned then, spatula in hand, eyes calm but sharp. Someone like who? A therapist? Maybe. Mark, please. She laughed lightly. He's a boy, not a soldier. A little discipline, a little faith. He'll be fine. She slid a pancake onto my plate and smiled again, but that smile didn't reach her eyes. That weekend I took Caleb out for ice cream, just the two of us. I thought maybe outside the house he'd open up. We sat on a bench near the park, the spring wind cold enough to make the cones melt slow. He kept glancing around like he expected someone to be watching. You having fun? Asked. He nodded. Hey, you can tell me if anything's bothering you, right? He hesitated, then looked straight at me. His lips trembled as he whispered, Please don't tell Mom I said anything. That broke something in me. It wasn't just fear in his voice. It was survival. Whatever was happening at night wasn't in his imagination. That evening, I told myself I'd stay awake again, just to be sure. But exhaustion took me first. When I woke around midnight, the house was silent. Vanessa was lying beside me, still as stone. I turned toward the clock at 11:47 p.m. And for a second, I thought I saw a faint glow under Caleb's door down the hall. It flickered once, then disappeared. By morning, Caleb was quiet again. I tried to convince myself I'd imagined it, that maybe it was just a nightlight. But when he reached across the table for the syrup, his sleeve slid back. That's when I saw it, a round red welt, circling his wrist, faint, but unmistakable, the pattern of a belt buckle, or something like it. What happened, buddy? I asked carefully. He froze, eyes wide, the spoon halfway to his mouth. Before he could answer, Vanessa walked in, tying her robe. He fell while playing, she said casually, pouring herself coffee. Her tone was effortless, smooth, almost rehearsed. I looked at her, then back at my son. Caleb didn't say a word. He just stared at his plate, hands trembling slightly. And for the first time I realized I was afraid, not of losing control, not of being wrong, but of what I might find if I finally opened that door in the middle of the night. It started with the sound of footsteps, soft, deliberate, every night around 11. At first I thought it was the pipes, or maybe the wind brushing against the siding. But then I started timing it. Every night, 11:03 p.m., sharp. The creak of the floorboards near Caleb's room, the faint click of his door closing, and then nothing. No voices, no movement, just a stillness, so deep I could hear my own heartbeat. Until one night, I did hear something. At first it sounded like praying, low rhythmic murmurs. Then the whisper of a child's sob, short muffled gasps between words I couldn't make out. I froze beside the door, holding my breath. The prayer turned into a chant, almost Vanessa's voice trembling with emotion. Lord, cleanse this child of disobedience, she whispered. Make him pure. I pressed my hand against the wall, every muscle in my body, screaming to move, to open the door. But fear glued me there. Not fear of her, but fear of what I might find. When the house went quiet again, I slipped back into our room. Vanessa returned 15 minutes later, climbed into bed, as though nothing had happened. She smelled faintly of candle wax and lavender soap. Everything okay? I asked. She smiled in the dark. He's possessed by anger, she murmured. I'm helping him through faith. I lay awake until dawn, the words echoing like a curse, possessed by anger. The next morning, Caleb wouldn't meet my eyes. He ate breakfast like a ghost, stirring his cereal long after it turned soggy. When I asked how he slept, he said, Mom helped me pray again. His voice was flat, robotic. Does that help you? I asked gently. He nodded. She says the devil hides in my thoughts. My throat went dry. You don't believe that, do you? He hesitated, then said, Mom says the devil makes kids lie. Something inside me cracked open. I wanted to scream that it wasn't true, that nothing about him was wrong or evil, but I saw the fear in his face, He wasn't lying. He was surviving. Over the next few days, I started paying attention to every detail. The way Vanessa watched him during dinner, how he froze when she touched his shoulder, how she always insisted on putting him to bed herself. Her voice grew colder when she talked about him. "He needs to learn respect," she said one night, while we cleaned the kitchen. "Caleb's a good boy," I replied, trying to keep my tone neutral. She looked up at me, then her eyes hard. "You're too soft on him. That's why he lies. He's testing you just like he tests me." That week, Caleb stopped sitting next to me on the couch, stopped talking during car rides, stopped calling me Dad out loud. It was like someone had pressed a mute button on him. When I tried to hug him, he stiffened like a touch might hurt. Something inside me broke that week. I couldn't lose another child to silence. Not again. The last time I saw that look in someone's eyes was when Anna, my first wife, was dying. She had that same quiet surrender, that look of someone fading away while the world went on, pretending everything was fine. And I'd promised myself standing at her hospital bed that I would never watch someone I love disappear again without fighting back. So I decided to stop pretending. I needed to know what was happening in this house while I was asleep or gone. I needed the truth even if it broke me. The next afternoon, I stopped by a local electronics store after work. The guy behind the counter was young, barely 20, bored out of his mind. "I need a small camera," I told him. "Something I can monitor from my phone." "Like a nanny cam?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "Something discreet." He showed me a few models: pens, alarm clocks, stuffed animals. I chose a tiny camera, disguised as a toy truck, the kind you could hide in plain sight. When I got home, Vanessa was in the kitchen baking. She smiled, kissed me on the cheek. "How was your day?" "Busy," I said, forcing a smile. "Just errands." Caleb was in his room, sitting on the floor, sorting his toys. I knelt beside him and held up the little truck. "Remember this one?" I asked, trying to sound casual. He nodded, but said nothing. When he left for the bathroom, I slipped the camera into the toy shelf, angling it just right to see the bed. My hands trembled the whole time. I hated myself for doing it, for invading his space, but I hated the not knowing more. That night, after Vanessa said goodnight to Caleb, we climbed into bed as usual. I pretended to scroll through my phone, but I was really watching the live feed. For a few minutes, all I saw was the dim outline of Caleb's blanket rooting and falling with his breath. Then, just like clockwork, the door creaked open. Vanessa stepped inside, holding a small candle. I muted the sound, terrified of what I might hear. But before anything happened, the feed glitched, static lines cutting across the screen. Then it went black. Connection lost. I sat there staring at the error message, heart pounding, sweat cold on my skin. Did she sense it? Did she know? The next morning I went to check the device. It looked untouched. Maybe it was interference. Maybe it was nothing. But when I turned the camera back on to test it, I heard something faint through the speaker, a voice. Vanessa's. She was in the living room talking to herself, maybe praying. Her tone was calm, deliberate, almost reverent. "God gives me strength to break him before he grows up like his father." I froze, the air leaving my lungs. Break him. Not teach. Not guide, break. The words pulsed through my head like a siren. Whatever was happening in that house wasn't about discipline or faith or obedience. It was about control. And I knew then, whatever she believed she was doing, she was destroying him. That night, for the first time, I wasn't afraid of what I might find. I was afraid of how far she was willing to go to finish what she'd started. The first night, nothing happened. I sat there in the dark, the blue glow from my phone washing across my face as I watched the feed from Caleb's room. The tiny camera hid perfectly among his toys, an old truck on the shelf facing his bed. Vanessa had tucked him in, At 10, kissed his forehead, whispered a prayer, and turned off the light. For hours, nothing but stillness. No sound, no movement, just my son's shallow, restless breathing. By 2 a.m., I convinced myself maybe I'd been wrong. Maybe my fears were just ghosts I'd created. Maybe she really was praying with him, helping him find peace. Maybe I'd turned into some paranoid old man chasing shadows. I turned off the screen and tried to sleep. But the next night, I learned the truth. It began the same way, Vanessa reading quietly in bed, pretending nothing existed beyond those four walls. When the clock hit 11:00, she placed her book on the nightstand and whispered, "Be right back." I feigned drowsiness, half mumbling, "Mm-hmm." The moment the door clicked shut behind her, I opened the app. The live feed blinked to life. The night vision was grainy gray-green shadows swallowing the room. Caleb was awake, sitting up, eyes wide in the dark. His lips moved, but I couldn't hear what he was saying. He looked toward the door, as if he knew exactly what time it was. Then the door opened. Vanessa stepped inside, candlelight flickering over her face. She looked calm, almost alien in the dim glow. "On your knees," she whispered. Caleb obeyed instantly. His small frame trembled as he knelt on the floor beside the bed. "This is for your own salvation," she said, her voice so soft it barely reached the microphone. She pulled something from her robe pocket, a strip of silver tape. Caleb whimpered, shaking his head. "Please, Mom, I'll be good, I promise." Vanessa placed a finger to her lips. "Hush. Obedience is peace." Then she pressed the tape across his mouth. The sound of it tearing echoed through the speaker, slow, deliberate, final. Caleb's muffled sobs filled the room. I couldn't move. My hands trembled so violently I almost dropped the phone. She lit another candle, placing it on the nightstand, and reached for the belt hanging from her robe. "Repeat after me," she said. Caleb's voice came out, broken, choked behind the tape. It didn't matter. She whispered over him a string of prayers that twisted and turned like thorns. And then, without warning, she raised the belt and brought it down hard. The sound, the sharp crack against skin, made me flinch even through the screen. Caleb convulsed with each strike, his small hands clutching the blanket for balance. His knees slipped on the hardwood, but he stayed in place. He didn't scream. He couldn't. Vanessa's voice stayed eerily calm. "Pain cleanses. Pain saves." Another strike. Another. My son's shoulders shook with silent sobs. Tears darkened the front of his pajama shirt. I wanted to burst through the door, to tear her away from him, to make it stop. But some cold, rational part of me whispered, "Get proof. Don't lose him again." So I sat there, my chest heaving, watching my wife hurt my child in the name of God. And I recorded every second. After what felt like forever, she stopped. She knelt beside him, lifted his chin with one finger. "You'll thank me in heaven," she murmured, and kissed his forehead, like she'd just blessed him. Then she blew out the candle, leaving the room in darkness. I stared at the screen long after she left, waiting to see Caleb move. He didn't. He just knelt there for a minute, trembling, then crawled into bed and pulled the blanket over his head. I watched him cry silently until he finally fell asleep. My own tears came then, hot, heavy, relentless. Every instinct in me screamed to protect, but guilt held me still. I had left him alone with her. I had married this woman, trusted her, handed her the keys to my son's safety. When the first morning light crept through our bedroom blinds, I finally saved the recording and backed it up twice, one copy on a flash drive, one in the cloud. I told myself I'd confront her when I had more evidence, enough that no one could twist it or make it vanish. That afternoon, while she took Caleb to school, I checked the camera. It was still there, the truck sitting in its place on the shelf. But when I opened the app again later to review the file, something felt wrong. The feed flickered for a moment, then showed the wall, Just the plain blank wall. Not the bed. Not the toys. Nothing. I frowned, scrolling through the playback. Everything before dawn was clear. But at some point after sunrise, the camera had been turned angled away from the room, like someone had touched it. A slow chill crawled up my spine. Had Caleb moved it? No. He didn't even know it was there. Which meant only one thing. Someone had found it. And that someone was my wife. For the next 2 days, the air in our house changed. It wasn't just tension. It was something invisible, but sharp, like walking barefoot on glass. Vanessa moved differently now. Slower. Measured. Her smiles lingered too long, her words wrapped in honey, but tasted like warning. I knew she'd seen the camera. I could feel it in the way she looked at me. She was watching me now. That morning she made breakfast like always: scrambled eggs, burnt toast, too much coffee. But she didn't hum her usual church hymns. She just stood by the window staring out at nothing. When I came down, she turned with a faint smile. "You didn't sleep much last night," she said. Not a question. "Neither did you," I replied. "Guess we both have restless hearts." Her eyes flickered for a second, something between amusement and suspicion. Then she said, "Some hearts stay restless because of guilt." I froze for a heartbeat, then forced a laugh. "What's that supposed to mean, just talking scripture?" she said softly, turning back to the window. But her knuckles were white on the coffee cup. Caleb barely spoke that day. He trailed through the house like a shadow, flinching when Vanessa walked past. I caught him sitting on the edge of his bed, clutching the old teddy bear I'd given him years ago, the one she'd torn. When I knelt beside him, he whispered, "Dad, did I do something bad?" My throat tightened. "No, son, you didn't." "She says God's angry with me." "She's wrong," I said firmly, trying to keep my voice from breaking. He looked up, his eyes wide and white. "Then why do I feel scared all the time?" I pulled him into a hug, whispering, "Because someone who should protect you is the one hurting you. But I promise it's going to end." He didn't answer. He just held on tighter. That night, dinner was a performance. Vanessa cooked roast chicken and lit candles like it was some holy occasion. The silence between us was heavy enough to choke on. Halfway through, she clasped her hands and began to pray aloud. Not the soft bedtime prayers she used to say. This was different, louder, almost like she was performing for an audience on scene. "Lord, bring unity to this home," she said, eyes closed, voice trembling. "Because a house divided cannot stand." The words sliced through the air. When she opened her eyes, they went straight to me. I forced a half smile. "You think our house is divided, Vanessa?" She set her fork down slowly. "Every house that hides sin is divided." "Sin." She tilted her head. "Secrets." The word hung there between us like smoke. I glanced at Caleb. He was staring at his plate, not eating, shoulders tight. Vanessa reached over and brushed his hair back with a too sweet smile. "Eat, sweetheart. You'll need your strength." The boy flinched. After dinner, I locked myself in the garage, pretending to check on my truck. My hands shook as I scrolled through my phone, opening the video I'd saved. It took me 3 tries to type the message, "Tommy, I need your help. Don't call. Just watch this." Tommy Sanders had been my best friend since high school. He'd spent 20 years on the Wichita PDAE before retiring early, after a shooting gone wrong. If there was one person I could trust with this, it was him. I uploaded the video file to a secure drive and sent the link. Less than 15 minutes later, my phone rang. "Jesus, Mark." Tommy's voice was low, raw. "Tell me that ain't what I think it is." "It is." Silence on the line. "Then, you need to get your boy out of there. Now. Don't wait another night." "She doesn't know I recorded it." "Bullshit," he cut in. "She's already acting off, right?" "Yeah. Then she suspects something. And if she flips, she'll twist the story. Women like that religious delusion control, they can cry abuse faster than you can blink. Cops won't know who to believe unless you're holding the evidence in your hand. I have it backed up. Good. But video or not, she's dangerous. Get Caleb out tonight. Call Child Protective Services if you have to. I'll make some calls on my end. Tommy, I can't just... Mark, he interrupted firm. You don't wait for the next hit to call it a fight. You end it before it ends you. I rubbed a hand over my face, the weight of his words sinking deep. He was right. Every hour I hesitated was another hour my son spent in danger. When I finally went back inside, the house was dark. Vanessa had already gone to bed. Caleb's door was closed. I stood there in the hallway, my heart pounding, trying to breathe. I told myself I'd wait just one more night. One more recording, one more proof. Then I'd get him out. I walked into our bedroom. Vanessa was lying on her side, facing the wall, motionless. I slipped quietly under the covers, my phone still in my hand. I opened the app. The feed came up for a moment. Caleb asleep. Blanket pulled tight. Relief washed over me. Then a sudden blink. The image froze. A red warning flashed across the screen. Camera connection lost. I stared at it, cold sweat running down my neck. And from somewhere down the hall, I thought I heard the faint sound of a door creak open. The next morning, the air felt wrong. Too still. Too quiet. When I came downstairs, Vanessa was already in the kitchen. The coffee was made, breakfast on the table, eggs, bacon toast. Everything just the way I liked it. She was humming softly, her back to me, shoulders moving in rhythm to the tune. It would have looked like a normal morning, if not for the way she turned when I entered. Her smile was different, colder, measured. "Morning," she said, voice bright as sunlight on glass. "Sleep well." Sure, I lied, pulling out a chair. "You..." "Oh, I slept fine," she said, tilting her head. "You didn't toss and turn like usual. Guess your conscience is lighter lately." I froze mid-bite. That wasn't casual. That was a test. She poured herself more coffee, eyes never leaving mine. "You know, Mark," she said slowly, "I found something in Caleb's room yesterday. Strange little toy truck. Doesn't belong to him." My stomach dropped. She smiled, waiting for my reaction. "Looks expensive, with a tiny blinking light on it." My fork hit the plate. Vanessa leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Spying on your own family," she whispered. "Is that what you've become?" I forced myself to breathe. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't lie to me," she hissed. "All pretense gone now. You think I don't notice when someone's trying to make me the villain? You planted that thing in my stepson's room, like I'm some kind of monster." "Vanessa, calm down. Calm down," she laughed, sharp and joyless. "You think you can trick me? That you can twist my faith into your lies? I know what you've been doing." Her hands were trembling now, but her voice was steady, too steady. She'd been rehearsing this. Caleb appeared in the doorway, pale and frightened. "Mom?" She turned instantly soft again. "It's okay, baby. Daddy's just confused." "Go back to your room, Caleb," I said gently. But he didn't move. He just stood there, eyes darting between us. Then Vanessa crouched down, her hand on his shoulder. "See? He doesn't trust us," she said sweetly. "He thinks I'm evil. He thinks you're lying to him." "Stop," I warned. "Don't bring him into this." Her voice dropped into a whisper, meant only for me. "You already did, the moment you put that camera there." Later that afternoon, I found Caleb sitting on the porch, staring at the yard. When I sat beside him, he flinched. "Buddy," I said softly, "you okay?" He shook his head. "Please don't make her mad again." "Hey," I said, heart cracking. "This isn't your fault." He looked up, tears brimming. She said, "You're trying to take me away." She said, "You'll send her to jail." I swallowed hard, forcing calm into my voice. "I'm trying to keep you safe." She said, "That's what bad men say before they hurt people." His words hit me like a knife. Vanessa wasn't just covering her tracks. She was rewriting the story, turning my own against me. That night, I packed a small duffel bag. Vanessa watched me from the hallway, arms crossed. "Leaving again?" she asked. "Another long trip?" "Just a few deliveries out west," I said evenly. "2 days." She smirked. "Make sure your conscience doesn't follow you." As I walked out, I caught a glimpse of Caleb standing behind her. His small hand clutched the doorframe, like he wanted to run after me, but didn't dare. I drove until I was a few blocks away, then parked on a quiet street. I couldn't really leave. I needed to think, to plan. I called Tommy, voice low. She found the camera. "She's turning it on me." "I figured," he said grimly. "You get the kid out yet?" I tried. "She's got him scared of me." "Listen, Mark. Women like her, religious delusion control, they don't back down. If she feels cornered, she'll do something stupid. Dangerous." "I know," I muttered. "Then stop playing defense. Go to the sheriff. Bring the footage." "I'm heading there now," I lied, starting the engine. "Just need to grab the files first." But before I could move, my phone buzzed again. Tommy's voice came through, urgent this time. "Mark, listen carefully. She's not at home. What, I've got a contact at the bus station. Your wife's there with Caleb." I gripped the steering wheel. "What the hell?" "She's telling people she's fleeing an abusive husband. She's got a bruise painted on her cheek, Mark." My heart stopped. "She's staging it," Tommy said flatly. "Setting you up for child abuse. She's got a ticket to Topeka. You've got 20 minutes to get there before that bus leaves." And in that moment, every mile I'd ever driven, every decision I'd ever made, funneled into one single thought: I will not lose my son tonight. The drive to the bus station felt like a fever dream. Every red light, a lifetime. Every second a countdown to losing my son, forever. Rain hammered against the windshield as I gripped the steering wheel, my chest tight, Tommy's words still ringing in my head. "She's at the station. 20 minutes. Mark. She's setting you up." I pushed the truck harder, tires skidding on wet asphalt, the wipers barely keeping up. The station lights appeared in the distance, pale halos through the mist. When I slammed the gear into park, I didn't even bother shutting off the engine. I ran. Through the glass doors, past the rows of tired travelers and vending machines, my eyes swept the crowd until I saw them. Vanessa. Her coat-soaked hair slicked back, one arm clutching Caleb's wrist. He was craning small shoulders, shaking under his backpack. She was talking to a ticket clerk, voice raised. "He's terrified of his father," she was saying. "We just need to leave town before he finds us." The words hit me like a physical blow. "Vanessa," I shouted, heads turned. The clerk froze. Vanessa's body stiffened before she slowly turned toward me, face perfectly composed, almost saintly. "Mark," she said, too calm. "You shouldn't be here." Caleb's eyes widened. "Dad," he cried, trying to pull free, but she yanked his arm tighter. "Let him go," I said, stepping forward, rain dripping from my jacket. She shook her head, eyes burning with defiance. "He's my son now. Mine. You weren't there when he needed a mother. I was working to keep a roof over his head, and I was saving his soul," she shouted, voice cracking. "You can't take that from me." People had started to gather, travelers, a few staff members. Someone pulled out their phone to record. I raised my hands, trying to keep my voice steady. "Vanessa, look at him. You're scaring him. He's scared of you," she screamed, tears streaming down her face. "You poisoned him against me. You planted cameras. You spied on us like a devil in your own home." Caleb was sobbing now, torn between us, his voice breaking through the chaos. "Dad, please, please stop." Security approached, radios crackling, but before they reached us, Vanessa tried to bolt, dragging Caleb toward the exit. I lunged forward, catching her wrist. For a heartbeat, everything froze. Her eyes wild, mine, desperate, Caleb between us, like a rope being pulled apart. Then she screamed, "He's hurting me! Somebody help!" The crowd erupted. 2 officers rushed in, separating us, shouting commands. "Sir, back away! She's kidnapping my son!" I yelled, panting, my voice hoarse. "She's lying." Tommy burst through the entrance, then flashing his old badge, like it still carried weight. "It's okay," he called to the officers. "I know this man. He's the father. Check the kid's wrist. Look at the bruises." One officer turned to Caleb, gently pushing up his sleeve. The faded marks told the story. I didn't have to. The other looked at Vanessa, her expression flickering from fury to panic. "Ma'am, we're going to need you to come with us." "No," she shrieked, thrashing. "He's a liar. He beats us both." Her voice cracked into hysterics. "I have proof he's dangerous." I reached into my jacket, pulled out the flash drive. "Here's my proof," I said, handing it to the officer. "Everything's on there. The abuse, the nights, all of it." Tommy backed me up. "That footage matches what the boy told his teacher." I called it in myself. It took 3 officers to hold Vanessa as she screamed, first rage, then something else. A sound that wasn't anger anymore, but loss. "You don't understand," she sobbed as they cuffed her. "I was saving him. God told me to save him." Caleb clung to me, then his face buried in my chest, shaking uncontrollably. "It's over, buddy," I whispered, kissing his hair. "You're safe now." An hour later, in the sterile light of the police station, I gave my statement. Caleb was with a social worker getting checked for injuries. Tommy sat beside me, his presence the only thing keeping me upright. When the detective came back, he looked grim. "We have her phone," he said. "You'll want to hear this." He placed it on the table, opened the photo gallery. Dozens of clips, some grainy, some clear, appeared on the screen. All of me, sleeping, working in the garage, even sitting in the living room reading. "She's been recording you for weeks," he said quietly, "trying to build a case." My stomach twisted. A case for what? The detective opened a draft email addressed to a family attorney. The subject line read, "Evidence of domestic abuse by husband." Below it, a single line, "If anything happens to me or my son, this will prove he's the monster." For a long moment, I couldn't speak. I just stared at the screen, at the warped reflection of the man she tried to turn me into. The detective sighed, closing the phone. "She's smart," he said. "But she underestimated one thing." "What's that?" I asked. He nodded toward the evidence drive in his hand. "The truth always leaves a mark, Mr. Reynolds. And you caught it on camera." The days that followed were a blur of paperwork, silence, and sleepless nights. When the police took Vanessa away, I thought it was over, that I'd finally saved my son. But in reality, that night was only the start of another kind of punishment. I wasn't allowed to see Caleb. Not yet. Temporary separation during the investigation, the detective had said. Standard procedure when both parents are under review. Under review. Even after the videos. Even after the bruises. Because of her recordings, those staged, twisted clips of me sleeping, scowling, raising my voice once during an argument, they had to verify everything. So they sent my boy to a child shelter for protection, just until things were sorted. And they sent me to an empty apartment the county rented for temporary housing. The silence there was worse than any prison cell. Every night, I sat on the edge of the bed, laptop open, replaying the same videos over and over, the evidence that saved my son, the proof that damned me. Each frame was a knife. Vanessa's shadow leaning over Caleb, the tape, the belt, the trembling, the silence. And I kept whispering the same question into the empty room. How did I miss the signs? How could I have stood in that same kitchen, at that same dinner table smiling, while my son lived in terror, just a few feet away? How could I have loved a woman so completely and known her so little? Tommy checked in every day, bringing coffee updates, the occasional half smile. "You're gonna be cleared soon," he kept saying. "The DA's already seen the raw footage." The timestamps, the confession tone in her voice, they line up. She can't twist that. He'd hired me a lawyer, his old partner, a tough ex-prosecutor named Linda Beck. She spoke in clipped sentences and never promised anything, but I trusted her bluntness more than comfort. "Vanessa's smart," she told me. "But she left fingerprints on every lie. We'll prove she manipulated everything, including those videos of you." Still, the doubt clung to me like a shadow. Because even if I wasn't guilty of what she claimed, part of me felt I was guilty of something else, of absence, of blindness, of faith misplaced. One evening, as I sat there replaying footage for what must have been the 100th time, there was a knock at the door. When I opened it, a woman stood there holding a grocery bag. Short gray hair, sharp eyes softened by age. "Mark Reynolds?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am. I'm Margaret, your aunt. Your mother's sister." It took me a second to process it. We hadn't spoken in years, not since Anna's funeral. "I heard what happened," she said simply. "And I thought, maybe you could use a home-cooked meal that wasn't out of a gas station." She stepped inside, like she owned the place, unpacking stew bread and a folded blanket. For the first time in weeks, the apartment smelled like life again. We sat in silence for a while eating. Then she said, "I spoke with the social worker. They said Caleb's quiet but safe." "You did right, Mark." I shook my head. "I did late. Too late." "You did when you could," she said, matter of fact. "You loved a woman who fooled you. That's not a sin. It's part of being human." Her words broke something in me. I hadn't realized how much I needed someone older, wiser, to tell me I wasn't a monster. When she reached across the table and took my hand, her grip was firm. "Don't spend the rest of your life hating her," she said quietly. "It'll eat you from the inside. Forgive not for her, but for him. For Caleb." "For Caleb," she nodded. "Because one day he'll look at you and decide what love looks like. Make sure it doesn't look like bitterness." 3 weeks later, the investigation cleared me. The forensic techs proved the recordings on Vanessa's phone were doctored, audio spliced, context twisted. Every lie she built unraveled piece by piece. When the detective handed me the clearance report, I didn't feel triumph, just emptiness. Relief should have come like a flood. Instead, it was a whisper lost in the wind. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just tired. Caleb was released into my care the same day. He ran into my arms without a word, holding on, so tightly I could barely breathe. And in that moment, the noise of the world disappeared. There was no case, no pain, no judgment, just my boy. That night, as he slept in the small bedroom of our new rental, I sat by the window, the city humming outside. My phone buzzed, a message notification from the county jail. It was an email from Vanessa. I hesitated before opening it. No subject line, just a scanned page in her neat looping handwriting. "You can take him from me, but you'll never take me out of his mind." I stared at those words for a long time. Then I closed the message and turned off the phone. Outside, thunder rolled somewhere far away. And in the silence that followed, I whispered to myself, "She's wrong." But a small part of me wondered if somewhere deep in my son's dreams, her shadow still lingered. The first real morning of peace didn't feel peaceful at all. It was quiet, yes, but the kind of quiet that hums with ghosts. The house was different now, smaller, humbler. A rental on the edge of Wichita, just enough for the two of us. But it was ours. No sermons whispered through the walls. No locked doors. No fear hiding in the dark. Still, Caleb flinched every time the wind rattled the window. I gave up the highway job the week after the case closed. No more endless miles of asphalt. No more nights in strange motels. I found steady work as a logistics supervisor for a small warehouse on the south side of town. Decent pay. Home every night. That's what mattered now, being there. For months, our days followed quiet routines: breakfast, school, work, therapy. It was structure thin, but steady, like the first beams of a rebuilt house. Dr. Ramirez was a godsend. A calm, middle-aged Latina with kind eyes and a voice that could have soothed a storm. At first, Caleb barely spoke in her sessions. He'd sit small in his chair, tracing invisible lines on his knees. But she was patient. She never pushed, only asked gentle questions like planting seeds in soft soil. One afternoon when I went to pick him up, she waved me in. He was sitting at her desk finishing a drawing. It was the same picture he'd made months ago, during the worst of it, one that used to make my stomach twist. A bed. A small boy. A woman's shadow standing over him. But this time it was different. Now the boy wasn't alone. Beside him stood a man, a tall figure, one arm stretched wide, shielding him from the darkness. The woman's shape was still there, faint, almost fading into the background. Caleb looked up at me shyly. "Does it look like us?" he asked. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Yeah, buddy, it does." Dr. Ramirez smiled. He said he wanted to draw the moment he stopped being scared. That night, I hung the drawing on the fridge. It was the first time our kitchen walls carried something that wasn't fear. Therapy wasn't just for Caleb. It was for me, too, in a different way. I started attending a local group called Fathers Rebuilding, a circle of men who'd lost families, custody, or themselves somewhere along the road. We met every Thursday night in the basement of St. Matthew's Church, coffee and folding chairs our only comforts. The first time I spoke, my voice cracked before the second sentence. I thought being a provider meant being present, I said. Turns out, I was gone even when I was home. The group leader, a big man named Harold, with kind eyes and a broken past of his own, nodded. He said something I'll never forget. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means you stop letting the pain own you. That line stuck to me like a compass. I went home and repeated it to myself as I brushed my teeth, washed the dishes, tucked Caleb in. And little by little, it started to feel true. Caleb began sleeping through the night. He still had bad dreams, sometimes nights, when he'd wake up crying, calling for me. But they were fewer now. When he did, I'd sit with him rubbing his back until he fell asleep again. He never asked for prayers anymore. He asked for stories. Sometimes we'd talk about his mom. Never in anger, just honesty. She was sick, right? He'd ask. Yes, I'd say. But you're safe now. And he'd nod as if that were enough for the moment. Spring rolled in with soft Kansas rain, and for the first time in years our little house felt alive. We planted tomatoes out back, built a birdhouse, laughed again. I started to believe we might actually make it. Then one Tuesday afternoon a package arrived. No return address, no note. Just my name written in neat, familiar handwriting. Inside, wrapped in brown paper, was a wooden ruler, cracked down the middle, splintered at one end. Old, faded. And for a moment, the air left my lungs. I'd seen that ruler before, years ago, in Vanessa's sewing kit. She used to keep it on the nightstand. I stared at it for a long time, feeling the weight of every silent night, every scar left behind. Then I wrapped it back in the paper, placed it in a drawer, and locked it away. Because forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It just means I won't let her own me anymore. A year later, the courthouse smelled faintly of dust and coffee, like every bureaucratic building in Kansas. But to me, it smelled like freedom. Vanessa sat across the room, wrists unchained but guarded by two deputies. Her hair had grown uneven, her eyes distant. She looked smaller somehow, not evil, just empty. The judge's voice echoed across the chamber. In light of the psychological evaluations and recorded evidence, the defendant is hereby sentenced to mandatory psychiatric treatment and permanent termination of parental rights. I didn't celebrate. There was no victory in hearing those words. Just quiet. A final closing of a door that had been open too long. When the judge adjourned, I stood, nodded once to my lawyer, and walked out without looking back. Some wounds didn't deserve a farewell. That spring, Caleb and I moved into a little white house on the edge of Antwerp. Nothing fancy, but it had a yard, big enough for him to run barefoot, and a fence high enough to keep the world out. We planted a maple tree in the back corner. He said it would grow with us. We adopted a dog, a scruffy brown mutt, from the shelter he named Rusty. Every morning, Rusty would chase Caleb down the yard, both of them barking, both of them free. I started sleeping again. Not always peacefully, but without fear. The kind of sleep you earn. Sometimes I'd catch Caleb sitting by the window drawing. This time his pictures were filled with color. No shadows, no darkness, just sunlight, laughter, a dog, and a big smiling man who always came home. That man was me. For the first time in a long time, I recognized him. When I turned 53, I decided to tell our story, not for pity, not for sympathy, but because silence is what let it happen in the first place. I set up an old camera in the living room, the same one I'd once used to record my son's fear. Now, it recorded something different, healing. The video wasn't fancy. Just me, a gray-haired man in a plaid shirt, talking to whoever might need to hear it. My name's Mark Reynolds, I began, voice steady but soft. And this is a story about losing everything that mattered and getting it back, the only way that counts. I talked about the guilt, the disbelief, the way love can blind you until it almost kills the people you're trying to protect. I talked about therapy, rebuilding trust, learning that strength isn't loud, it's quiet, patient, consistent. And I talked about Caleb. When I said his name, I smiled. My revenge wasn't seeing her locked up, I said. It was seeing my son laugh again. I paused, letting the silence carry that truth farther than any anger ever could. Life doesn't give you back what you lose, I continued. It gives you a chance to build something better with what's left. And if you ever feel too old to start over, remember, peace itself can be the sweetest revenge. I turned off the camera, sat back, and listened to the sounds of the house. The soft padding of Rusty's paws, the sound of Caleb's laughter from the yard, wind through the maple leaves. No screams, no prayers twisted into cruelty. Just peace. That was my justice. That was my victory. And it was enough.